Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Social Academic. This is Jennifer Van Alstyne, and we are right after Election Day. So there are a lot of feelings and emotions out there. And even though this episode isn't going to air for a little while, the topic we are talking about today is social justice. I'm very excited to bring my guest, Dr. Andrea Rexilius, to talk about this new anthology, We Can See Into Another Place, Mile High Writers on Social Justice. Andrea, thank you for coming on The Social Academic. Would you introduce yourself for people?
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. Good to see you. So I am a professor and writer living in Denver, Colorado, teaching at Regis University in the Mile High MFA and Creative Writing program. I think that's all I'll say.
Great. I'm curious because you reached out to me about this episode, and I'm wondering what prompted this anthology? What made you decide to bring together these faculty, these writers from the Mile High program together into one collection?
Well, they're such interesting writers. They're varied in terms of their genre, their aesthetic, which is also representative of the program that they were all teaching in. But a lot of them, there's about 20, 21 of them in the anthology, and they don't all always overlap. So I wanted to kind of, since they're all part of that same conversation, teaching similar students, working with the Mile High MFA program at various times over the last 9 years, I just wanted to put them a little bit more in conversation with each other, especially some of them that hadn't crossed paths before, just to celebrate, all of them together and share their work with, I think some of them probably looked each other up, but just to share their work with one another and with the public, with everybody else, because there's just tremendous writing coming from all of them. So
yeah, the collection was tremendous and emotional and almost fraught with language that really pulls you in. And so I'm curious, it brings together a lot of genres, like multi-genre anthology. What made anthology and book the right format for sharing these stories?
Yeah, I think in terms of anthology, it was kind of unusual to gather a kind of multi-genre format for an anthology. There's traditionally fiction, or they're creative nonfiction, or they're poetry, and a lot of writers only maybe read in one of those genres. A lot of readers only read in one of those genres. We also have a graphic narrative, a comic strip in here. We have some playwriting. And so all of those different ways of kind of conveying ideas seemed interesting to gather into one publication, and to sort of begin to maybe break down some of those barriers across genre. There's more and more interest in hybrid writing and reading hybrid materials, but something that actually celebrates genre distinctions and also genre overlap seemed like an important thing to sort of add to the literary conversation.
I felt like your essay at the start, the introduction, was so powerful in terms of shaping, I don't know, the openness and the hope and the tenuousness that writers can achieve through storytelling. And I really found myself transported into each one of those writers' forms. I mean, really, it felt like I was jumping from poetry to play to the graphic one. It was just overwhelming in the sense that I hadn't really considered so many voices on this subject in the genre bending kind of format. It was a different kind of experience to me compared to other things that I've read about social justice, that I've watched about social justice this year. And it felt more powerful because of that. Like the collective of voices and the difference in genre made it more meaningful and impactful for me. Did you find that when you were putting together, the different sections and the layout for the book?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really interesting because initially, what kind of bound the writers together was their overlapping relationship with the MFA program. But I also just wanted to, so I wanted to create an artifact of that kind of archive, all of those voices that were part of that community at the Mile High MFA, which still it's still continuing on, but that's the first
Yeah.
9 years of it. Um, and I didn't have the theme so much in mind when I first started gathering things, but I
Ooh.
wasn't sure, is this something I'm just going to make as a kind of PDF that I make available to the community, or am I going to try to seek out a publisher and put it into the larger world? And pretty early on, I had begun gathering some things, and in the process of gathering them, I started shopping around some local presses in the Colorado area to see if it might be something they'd be interested in. And as so, sort of a long answer to what you asked me, but as I was shifting, into okay, it's actually going to be published by a press. It's going to be a book that is available to anybody. It's not just sort of in-house community. I started noticing patterns in the early submissions, and that's where the theme began to develop from.
Mm.
And also seeing like how some of the poems communicated with the fiction, just the little overlaps in detail that were coming in, were really interesting. And that's how the YA interview got in there as well, because there were
Ah.
so many writers, um, like Stephen Dunn's piece, Addie Sai's piece, Lori Oslin's piece, where they're talking about experiences in high school or as young adults, and how writing impacted them, why they became writers and avid readers, and what their experiences too were with reading. They weren't always delightful,
Yeah.
you know. So that started to kind of naturally grow out of the process of gathering those submissions.
And for those of you who are listening, Stephen Dunn did appear on The Social Academic a few years ago, so be sure to check out that interview. I'm
Yeah.
curious, who do you feel should really read this book? Who should go out and buy a copy or buy it for someone that they know or love?
I mean, on the day that we're recording this, I would say everybody should go read this book. I mean, there's many different um, representations and iterations of what we mean by social justice in the book. It
Mm.
speaks to um, social economic stuff. It's speaking to race relations, all kinds of different power dynamics. It's speaking to, neurological difference, the environment. It's just a wide swath of what we think about when we are collectively, socially trying to enact justice for ourselves in our daily lives. But it also, like, the thing that I think about when I come to social justice is the idea of radical imagination and,
Ooh.
the idea that the mind, the interior, I quote Emily Dickinson at the beginning of the book. I'm a poet, so I'm always referencing her, but she has a line, the brain is wider than the sky. So, this idea that, like, the mental space, the interior space, is larger than this external world. It can
Mm.
imagine anything. So when it feels like when possibilities are shutting down, I think the most um, powerful thing you can do is just remember that you have your own imagination. You can envision a different way forward. You can still be disappointed. We still have all of our emotions in relation to these things, but being able to maintain and hang on to that hope, um, and awareness that, like, it's always yours. It's always in you. You always have that power of the interior and the mind to think differently than what the external world might be kind of crushing you into thinking and feeling and being.
Oh, that was powerful. I needed to hear that too. I'm like crying. I'm like, well, do I have tissues near me? And I don't. But what I really gravitated toward from what you said is the word hope. Like the imagination can create hope. It can create futures that we haven't experienced or thought of. It can be world opening.
Mm-hmm.
How do you hope this book can inform or provide an entrance into some kind of change or transformation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm going to quote a couple things and then talk about the final section of the book. So my
I'd
kind of
love that.
framework, let me just adjust my frameworks at Emily Dickinson again. I dwell in possibility because I think so much of diminishment of hope is feeling that the possibilities are becoming fewer and fewer. But again, that idea of radical imagination, if we can imagine something different than what we are being told must happen, or that there's this kind of non-linearity, there's always a possibility for something to shift or to swerve. And the more we think toward that possibility, I think the more empowered we stay. And then this Toni Morrison quote was so important in thinking about putting together this book. She says, "Don't let anybody convince you this is the world is and therefore must be. It must be the way it ought to be." Um,
Mm.
So, I mean, that speaks similarly, I think, to the Emily Dickinson piece about possibility, that nothing has to be any particular way. Sometimes it is that particular way, but knowing that, we still have so much inside of us that can speak out, that can share our experiences, that can voice things that dissent from um, the powers that be. I mean, hopefully we retain that powers. I mean, we people go underground. They make zines. We get the word out in whatever way we need to. And right now, there's this book. The last section, we move into questions for the reader that kind of um, bring you into this state of reflection and get you in touch with your own ideas and imagination. So, what would you
Yeah.
like to give voice to? Because I think, well, yeah, what would you like to give voice to? How do you survive and thrive when everything feels like it is on fire? That's a great question for
Ooh.
today.
Today is
Um,
the day for that one. Ooh.
and probably in the coming days and first
Mm.
of the year, that'll be a great one to to speak to. Um, what is your hope for reimagining of our societal and cultural future? What actions would help us move individually and or collectively toward that reimagined future? So
Mm.
finding ways to bring those spaces, this radical imagination and those imaginings into external action too, starting small, making it grow larger, finding people um, to share your voice with who have similar thoughts and feelings, putting it in a book form, reading something where other people speak to that. Um,
Mm. A lot of professors, faculty members are listening to this podcast, and I'm curious, is this a book that would fit well in like a classroom discussion? Is this something that can or should be taught?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it would be great for high school, for college, for book clubs, for all kinds of reading groups, because they're part of the multi-genre aspect too, is like um, there's something in it for everybody. If you're not super into reading essays, there's a comic. If you don't love poetry, there's short stories. If you aren't into any of that, there are some interviews with young adult authors at the end. There's places for you to do your own thinking and writing and responding to whatever was in the book. So it is meant to be engaging in that way, to invite people to participate in the conversation of the book and to add their own voice if they think something's missing from it, if there's something, that they want to add. All of those openings are there. And it would be great, I think, too, just thinking about in a classroom setting, thinking about how the different genres and pieces in here speak to these topics as well. What unique
Mm.
things happen formally in short story or poetry or essay. So yeah, thanks
Mm.
for asking that.
Now, as editor, I know maybe you don't have like favorites, but I'm curious if you have one or two pieces you could share with us that maybe
Sure.
especially faculty members might find a spark or something that really draws them in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Stephen Dunn, and I think his piece in here is just absolutely brilliant. And he is speaking about his experiences in English class and feeling left out of that conversation, feeling like it's a conversation just for white people. He's only reading stories written by white authors and is being told that. His voice is incorrect, that he needs to correct his grammar, his way of being, his way of speaking. And I think that's another thing, like that this book demonstrates to some extent through the genre, but also part of what we were all trying to do in the program together with students was just let let people know, like, you can be who you are. So
Mm.
in order to be a good writer, you have to speak. You have to get in touch with what who you actually are and what you actually want to say. And that's when the writing
Mm.
becomes the most powerful. You shouldn't be trying to conform your voice to anybody else's. Um, and I hear that in Stephen's piece and uh, Addie Size piece. There's a lot of interesting reflecting in a lot of the pieces too. David Heska Wanbley Wyden is writing this essay about his grandmother who was in a Native American boarding school that are,
Yes.
infamous for, um, you know, uh, cultural obliteration and all kinds of horrific things. And she
Mm.
has this nostalgia for the boarding school. So he's kind of reckoning with that and sort of wondering why, answering, why she might have that nostalgia in really interesting, complicated ways. And the ending of that piece, I think, really speaks to that reckoning with his grandmother's state of mind and why she might have had that nostalgia and what other forms of
Right.
nostalgia she had. I don't want to spoil the ending, but that's one of my favorites because it,
I loved that piece.
yeah.
I'd be happy if you'd be open to reading something. That sounds great.
So I'll read maybe a little bit from Stephen's piece that I was talking about, more beige. All right. I don't know what happened. Um, okay. It's a snow day here. I usually am wearing bright colors, but I'm in beige today. So this book too, or the piece from Stephen Dunn, it's from a book that he's working on called Travel with Nas. And he is co-writing it with a bunch of his friends and family members, which is so it's a collaborative project. He recently published another book, Tannery Bay, which he co-wrote with Katie Jean Schinkel. So that idea of sort of conversational, collaborative writing comes through in his work in general too.
I love that.
So, okay, he says, this is intro, an excerpt from Travel with Nas by Stephen Dunn. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, Kimball, population 500. I read a lot before going to middle school, but outside of textbooks and newspapers, I read only one book from the ages of 12 to 21. I'm a novelist now, a creative writing professor, and I write book reviews. Reading only one book was partly an institutional fault and partly my fault. Partly my fault because I cared more about math, painting, and maps. Partly an institutional fault because of poverty. and we were assigned only one little funky-ass book throughout middle and high school, The Old Man and the Sea. We watched Of Mice and Men, Grapes of Wrath, and Little Women. I hated English classes because they were mostly about correcting our language by prescribing us with ways to speak. We learned that the generations of language we celebrated in, cried in, analyzed with, and joked in was wrong. And the books were about white people and white problems and white triumphs and white hopes and white dreams. So I was like, fuck English and literature and all that white bullshit. I was right and I was wrong. I was wrong about English and literature because, of course, Black people had been writing literature about us. I just didn't know shit about it, and then white folks ain't care enough to teach it. I was right because I was listening to rap, and I was wrong because I was listening to rap.
Oh, Stephen Dunn's words are so powerful. I love that he's interested in collective writing and also that he posts about the writing that he does on Facebook. So even if you're not, the book's not out yet, but like I feel like I know a little bit more about Nas and about his process of writing it because he's open to sharing it. Actually, that kind of brings me into my next question. I'm curious about your online presence as an author. What's it like to be a faculty member and a writer and just like a person who your personality is like quite vivacious in the sense that it's so memorable? How do you craft all of that online and show kind of your personality when you're in online spaces?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm pretty introverted, pretty like I feel like yeah, it's hard to know how that comes across, but I think on my social media, the way I curate it, because we're all sort of curating it to some extent, you know,
Yeah.
I'm trying to maybe express my academic self on there, posting about books, about readings, sharing events with students, trying to kind of build that community with the MFA students
Mm.
and everybody in the front range, bringing different communities that I'm part of together. I'm teaching at Lighthouse, a writers workshop, a
Ah.
community creative writing place, and also at Regis University. So sort of colliding some of those folks at times. And then I have my sort of like more artsy, poetic life where I'm doing some volunteer classes at this farm in Lafayette that some of my friends run.
Really?
They have a farm share. It's called
That sounds
Common
so
Name
cool.
Farm, and there's an art lab. So I had a former student of mine donated a bunch of art supplies, and so it's just overfilling with art supplies. So I've been hosting like collage and mask making parties there. Um,
Oh, that's amazing. Mask
yeah,
making parties. I'm so jealous. So, Dr. Exilius and I know each other from Naropa University at the Jack Kerouac School back when I was in my MFA program. So I'm so excited we're having this conversation now, but like I am super jealous of these art classes. That sounds so fun. And I love that what I see from you on social media is a lot of your artistic side. Like I remember your moth costume, your masks, like I love seeing that part of who you are in online spaces for sure. What about as an author? We talked about like what you do for your community.
right.
What's it like talking about yourself as an author online? That one's really fun.
Um, Talking about myself as an author, I probably should do more of that because I tend to keep my process pretty low key. I
Mm.
don't share about my writing process as much. I share more about the end result. I might share more about my creative
Yeah.
process. I share more of the kind
Mm.
of masks and art making that I'm doing, visual art making.
Yeah.
But if I have something finished, published, then I'll share that. Um,
Nice.
yeah. So, but I like to, yeah, I keep my process a little bit more to myself because I like to have it untouched by other opinions. and,
Oh, oh, I'm so glad you shared that. That's a really nice perspective. It's not so much as private as protecting it, almost
yeah.
like protecting your process. That's beautiful.
Mhm,
Oh, thank you for
mhm.
sharing that with me. I'm curious, is there anything you really dislike about social media or about being online?
I don't like social media.
You
Really
don't
in
like it at
general.
all. That's
No.
totally fine.
When you asked, I was like, "Oh shit!" I just panicked. I
No,
was like, "Do I have a presence?" I do because because I'm the director of this program. I have a presence to be online for that. I do have different sort of pages that I manage, so different hats that I put on. I post more of the artsy, personal stuff on my own page. That's me. But it also part of me is that community aspect, and then I have some program specific pages where it's maybe a little
yeah.
more professional or like posting sharing work by the authors, in this collection, sharing student work, as much
Mm.
as I know if people tell me about it. um, but I find
That's always part of the process.
yeah, like I don't want to, I'm not spending, I try not to spend a lot of time scrolling on social media.
Yeah,
um, but Yeah, I think I guess I like the part of it that I do like is it does connect so many aspects of my world over the years that otherwise would have,
mm,
many of them I think would have disappeared from my life entirely, like,
yeah.
friendships in high school, things like that. And it is really nice to sort of just see what people are up to, even
I
if
think so
I'm,
too.
somebody that I was best friends with when I was 16 or something, just to get a glimpse
Yeah.
at their life.
I saw a
Um,
childhood friend of mine who I haven't talked to in, oh my gosh, a couple decades maybe. Just had a child yesterday, and
uh-huh.
I was so touched for her. Like we don't talk, but it still felt meaningful to me. So you
Mhm.
don't like social media, and you have actually a strong online presence compared to a lot of faculty members because you're wanting to be part of that community and wanting to bring together communities as well. That's really interesting.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I always
So,
think if I didn't have
yeah.
this job, I would leave Facebook, but I'm
Oh,
still
that's
there.
interesting. Yeah, you're still there. That's true. Well, you got to have somewhere to share your masks.
That's right. Yeah. I might keep it just to share the masks. I say I would leave, but
Mm.
I probably just share weirder things.
Right, a little bit leaning more into your personality.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, academics who I'd say don't consider themselves writers are listening to this, and I want them to go out and
Mhm.
buy your book. I'm also curious, like, if they are interested in leaning into more social justice lenses or social justice audiences, even for their writing, is there
Mhm.
somewhere you recommend they start? Maybe if this is their first time leaning into that area?
If they are writers,
I'd say they're academics who maybe don't consider themselves writers, even though they do quite a bit of writing.
well, there's lots of amazing literary conferences of all
Mm.
sizes and uh, topics and themes. There's a couple of things that I would note, like in Denver. There's a really great conference that the Word Storytelling Sanctuary runs. They have a conference called Margins, and
Ooh.
so it's an audience primarily of people of color who are writers, um, talking about all types of different things. Some of that just, overlaps social justice. And I think that idea, radical imagination, too, is this sort of uh, holding equally everybody's voice and making space for everybody's voice to be heard, and maybe even making more space for the voices that are typically more marginalized.
Mm.
So that place would be a good place to start. There's also a website called Writing the Other that
Ooh.
is for writers and thinking about the publishing industry and how to thinking about representation, appropriation, those kinds of issues, and how to navigate those as writers, which I think also relates writers, academics, social justice, kind of entwines with all of those things. Um, and then looking at, this anthology has so many amazing authors in it. You can read any of them, read interviews by them. They're on podcasts, they're doing online interviews. They have amazing things to say creatively, critically, academically. So there's 20 people right there who have your back and can who are also really open and friendly and up for answering questions. I shouldn't speak for all of them, but reach out, see if they are willing to engage. They definitely do. A lot of them do classroom visits. They are used to sort of doing interviews and podcasts and things like that too.
Oh, that is so cool. I want everyone to go out and get your copy of We Can See Into Another Place. This is an important anthology, especially for academics like you. Oh, made a big difference when I read it, and I hope it does for you as well. Andrea, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on, talk about before we wrap up today?
I think we got everything. Thank you so much for having me. It was really lovely to see you again and have this
Yeah.
conversation with you.
Oh, I'm so excited to share your book with everyone and to feature you on The Social Academic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.